much. So I have some slides. I'll put them in the chat here if you want to bring them up on your own. Maybe I can share them as well if you get that request, Jackie. Okay, great. Let's see here.
Well, Marion is saying she's at somewhere and it's too loud, which is why she can't join us.
I'm listening. I can hear you. I don't think you'll be able to hear me very well.
We just did. We heard you just now.
Okay.
Well, if you can hear me fine, then that's fine. I just didn't want like the background noise to be really loud. But hi, I'm Mary Paz, and I'm on staff. Raise your hand. I'm also a CPSU at what brings me to the this is like my second or third Chicago Women's Take Action Education Committee meeting. And what brings me here is I am concerned about the state of public education, specifically CPS, but now with everything going on at the national level, even more so just like in general.
Okay, thank you, Marion. It was sort of difficult to hear you. You've got some interference wherever you are. Go ahead now, Cassie. We can see your screen very well. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna mostly talk about this federal voucher program that is a big threat right now. But it hasn't happened yet, so we're organizing against it. I'll start out though that there's a whole just array of attacks. I mean, from every side on all public goods around the country right now from the federal government, but sort of a whole additional set of attacks on public schools. And so I won't necessarily go into detail about some of these, but we could talk more about them depending, what you guys want to be organizing against. So there's kind of like one stream where it's gutting the resources and the support for public schools. There's been threats to the federal funding for public schools, in part because they want to demolish the Department of Education, where all that money goes through. Also, there's been this whole push essentially to prevent and stop schools from having equitable policies. And actually there was a very good court ruling today blocking some of that, where they've been essentially threatening schools and saying, if you have diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, we're going to take away your funding. Nearly everything I'll talk about tonight isn't actually legal. So just to put that in the big perspective, so much of this is happening sort of outside actual established federal law. They've been ending the data collection and research that especially the Department of Education is doing. And something
you say that's been ending, did you say?
Yeah, I mean, some of it has been cut, like research grants have been ended and like just slashed.
Okay, yeah.
But there's also been like sort of the internal research and data collection that the Department of Education itself does. Like the NAEP tests, like the national low stakes tests that they've been doing for decades to track how students are doing. There's been like Linda McMahon has said they won't stop those, but it looks actually like a lot of them will not be administered, and they fired almost everyone in the department that would administer them. So those are under threats too. The Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education has been just really decimated. The Chicago office has been closed. They started canceling hearings, really, I think I heard even before the Trump administration came in. And so this is especially a negative impact on students with disabilities. This is sort of like the big way that IDEA is enforced, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it's kind of like your one recourse, especially here in Illinois. You can get some recourse from the State Board of Ed, but a lot of states around the country, if you don't have the federal government enforcing special ed law, you're just kind of left out. And so that's sort of this whole stream of things that are happening. And then there's other thing that's happening is a push to funnel public money to private schools. So there's kind of been two different things there. One is an executive order that came out in January, and then another is the thing I'll mainly talk about tonight is legislation that would create a national voucher program. So combining these two things is really just, if you know, especially if the federal voucher program were to be created, that's really just a 1-2 punch against the public school system. I'm not even doing this in like slideshow format, you guys. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm just gonna stick with that. So there's been kind of two federal initiatives so far. One is what a presidential executive order. It's important to note that in there it says like this order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law. So it really shouldn't be doing new things. As we've seen with a lot of the executive orders, they aren't really sticking to existing law. So that is problematic. But really sort of, if you read the executive order, it's about figuring out how to use especially dollars that states are already getting for their public school programs and pushing them and diverting them off to private schools. And then the second sort of big federal initiative that's still underway is the Educational Choice for Children Act, and that's a piece of legislation that would create a really massive new federal school voucher program, and that would actually require a vote from Congress. So I'll just quickly, here's a little bit more about the executive order on school privatization, and like if you go back to that last slide, you can click through the links in here later if you want more details. There was a little pushback from Congress on this. 45 members of Congress wrote to the president calling on him to rescind this order, including 9 of our 17 members of the congressional delegation from Illinois. It was really led by Representative Schakowsky, who has been a great advocate against vouchers and privatization. So to give you just kind of the briefest background with school vouchers, there's really problems with any type of voucher. There's different ways to structure school vouchers, but at the sort of heart of all of them is that you're diverting public dollars away from underfunded public schools. Here in Illinois, 80% of our schools really are not, don't have that funds adequate to educate the kids who are coming in the door. It's using taxpayer funds for the most part for religious schools because the majority of private schools are religious, which violates the separation of church and state. You really have far less transparency when you're handing public dollars to a private school than you have in a public school where you have elected school boards and you have a lot of public documents and you can FOIA where money is going and what kids are learning. You really have dramatically decreased protection of student civil rights. As a parent, you're essentially giving up most of your kids' civil rights when you send them to private school. And very few of our federal civil rights laws apply to students in private school. And one thing, there's a lot of propaganda around voucher programs, but the truth is, after decades of voucher programs in this country, we know that vouchers do not improve academic outcomes. And in especially the longer term studies, they actually worsen them. So it's not just that they aren't doing a whole lot to improve things. Kids actually, have worse outcomes, especially on standardized test scores once they've participated in a voucher program. So if we're really caring about that as a measure of what schools are doing, these are fundamentally bad policy decisions. And then also they really increase segregation by race, by class, by disability, and they overall are decreasing education equity. So ECHA, this Educational Choice for Children Act that's been proposed, would create a whole brand new federal voucher program. We had this state voucher program in Illinois that we discontinued just in the last couple of years. There's a lot of voucher programs around the country now, but there's still many states that don't have vouchers, and this program would essentially overrule any sort of state and local control and basically have this giant program where kids in any state going to essentially any private school could get a voucher. It's in its proposed state, it's really big, $10 billion a year for 10 years with some increases built in. The way the vouchers would be distributed, it would just be through these really lightly regulated nonprofits. Scholarship granting organizations is what we call them here in Illinois in a similar program. There'd be no limits on how big a voucher could be. The income limit for recipients is extremely high for participants. So in the Chicago area, really, a family of 4 with $300,000 annual income could still get a voucher. So that's actually much, much higher than the limits in Illinois, which were actually very generous and resulted in a lot of families over who say would not qualify for free and reduced lunch being qualified for a voucher. So this is way far beyond that. There really would be no regulations of schools or voucher use permitted by states. So, this means in addition that schools could discriminate on pretty much any basis if they were getting vouchers. And on top of that, there's like these really strong prohibitions that states couldn't discourage voucher use, which you would assume would start to be interpreted as things like even the state giving out factual information about private schools. Like, hey, your teachers are not certified at this school, this school has not passed the fire code, etc. That would not be allowed. So you were essentially be, hamstrung to say anything about the schools that these vouchers could be used at. And then finally, like a lot of programs that are around the country, money could be used for homeschooling or online schooling expenses. And when we've seen programs like that elsewhere, especially Florida and Arizona, those are really big. They are really like, they're sort of like the picture of waste, fraud, and abuse, only it's really happening. So people are spending these educational saving accounts dollars on things like pizza ovens and jet skis and tickets to like Disney World, and these are allowed by how the programs are run. And so they're just very, very like essentially unregulated, and the opposite of what we really think of as a high quality public education that's being funded by public dollars. So one sort of little twist with the ECA program is that it's a tax credit scholarship. That's the same thing we had here in Illinois. It is done this way. Partly so a voucher, it's kind of like a strict traditional voucher, is that you would appropriate tax dollars that would then essentially go directly to paying costs at private schools for private school students who got a voucher. With a tax credit scholarship, you sort of sever that tie. And so you have a middleman organization. And so instead of, you're a wealthy donor, instead of paying your taxes, you pay this middleman organization that's like funneling the vouchers. Then you get dollars directly off your tax bill. And then that scholarship granting organization is who administers the voucher program. So this was designed this way in part to basically get around the separation of church and state. And so dollars are not going directly out of the US Treasury to a religious school. And so that's essentially why it's designed this way. And it's also, it does some weird things where instead of like a normal tax deductible charitable donation, where you might get about 30% off of the amount that you donated off your tax bill, this is like a one-to-one credit. It can be even higher if you're donating something like stock that has appreciated. So it's really also sort of like a big, like tax dodge as well. And it kind of changes the incentives of the whole charitable donation system. So if we created this, suddenly it would be you get a much more generous tax credit for donating to a private school than to any other cause. So like, homeless shelter or, services for veterans or, an animal hospital or something, some other kind of charitable thing, you would get many fewer dollars back. So it's a very weird incentive thing. So the bad news here is that this could be part of what's known as the reconciliation bill that's sort of underway right now, that they're ironing out what's going to be happening in that. And that could happen within essentially like the next month. That's sort of the goal of the Republican leadership, is to try to get a reconciliation bill put together and passed by Memorial Day. And even though this is really, this would be a dramatic change to education policy in our country, but it's because it is created in this credit scholarship form, it is something that's going to be just written as a little change to the tax code. And so for that reason, it could be inserted into a reconciliation bill, which is really only supposed to be about taxing and spending. But so this makes it sort of even sneakier. One of the special things about reconciliation bills is that you do not need, you can't filibuster them. So a simple majority in the Senate can pass them. So they're essentially easier to pass in that way. And the truth is, vouchers are actually not particularly popular with Republicans. And during Trump's first term, a voucher bill did not pass because they didn't have the votes to do it. So sticking it inside of reconciliation is like a way to try to get it to happen this time. On the plus side, the margin in the House is super narrow. And so even if just a very, very few Republicans oppose a bill, it can't pass. So as they are trying to like put together a reconciliation bill where they're going to be able to get the votes in the House to get it over the finish line, there's going to be a ton of jockeying about like, hey, this is a red line. I can't vote for a bill with that in it. So the sort of strategic goal is to find some Republicans who are willing to sort of put themselves out there for vouchers because their own constituents are like, no, we do not want those. And that's sort of the strategy here. So it turns out we really do actually have, we only have 3 Republicans in the House from Illinois. One of them has actually been very pro-public education during his career. He was previously in the General Assembly, and he has been very supportive of the public schools in his district and of teachers. And if this was a standalone bill, I think he would probably vote no for it. But if it is put into the reconciliation package, then it's a lot harder. So this is we kind of saw the same issue in Illinois, where it was possible that our voucher program would be continued by sticking it into a bigger budget bill. So once something's in that package, it's hard to get people to vote no against this whole big package. But if you can keep it out, then you're in kind of good shape. So there is a whole national coalition. It's called the National Coalition for Public Education that's been working on opposing ECA. Illinois Families for Public Schools, Network 49, some other organizations in the state have been sort of working more on the grassroots level. The National Coalition for Public Education has been mostly working on the Hill, talking to, especially on the House Republican side, lobbying. So we are trying to do some more grassroots efforts here in Illinois. So I have some actions here that you can take just as an individual. You can, call up your rep, call up your senators. And we also have a little form thing here that you can use to email all 3. And then one sort of bigger action this coming Monday, we're going to be phone banking to constituents in Illinois 12. So that's kind of almost like the bottom third of Illinois. Like it's really geographically a very big area. And it was also an area with very few voucher recipients in our state voucher program. And it's a place where the schools are still very underfunded. 90% of schools there are Title I qualified schools. So these would be schools that would be really hurt if federal funding were cut and Title I were dismantled. So, this is a place that should oppose vouchers, but there hasn't necessarily been that much happening on the ground to, have them put pressure on their rep, Mike Bost in particular. So for you guys as a committee, there's other, this is a sort of an immediate and urgent issue. But, there's other ways to get involved. And I think all of these attacks ongoing on public schools, there's a lot of room to sort of like many different aspects of it to try to push back on, and ways to organize against it. So yes, so it is definitely a very short, there's this like acute need in the short term to try to push back and stop ECA from being put into the reconciliation bill. But longer term, there's, a whole lot of other stuff coming down that we have to fight. So that's sort of my presentation part. Hopefully it wasn't either too slow or too fast, but I'm
No.
happy to answer questions. Chris has been working on this, we worked a ton together on the fighting the previous voucher program and ending it. And then also have partnered on this work on the Educational Choice for Children Act too. So she's also available to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Can you from my point of view, can you all talk about how the work that you did to defeat the Illinois bill? How are there analogies that can give us some hope or give us some directions and because it sounds like it's very, very formidable to and in a very short period of time. Chris or Cassie, either one of you, the work that you already have done, how did it fare in terms of what we'd have to do now?
I mean, in some ways it's a very different fight because the fight in Illinois was really almost entirely on the Democratic side of the aisle. And so this was a fight between Democrats who like vouchers and Democrats who don't. And so the dynamic of like what to explain to people about how bad vouchers are, we used a lot of the data on like racial inequity, on discrimination against LGBTQ plus students and staff and families. And so those arguments are not going to fly on the Republican side of the aisle. But I think there's still concerns, even among Republicans, about discrimination against students with disabilities. So I think that's a very strong argument. And the truth is, I mean, it's true in, urban and suburban areas too, but, it's really just economically devastating for rural areas to lose their schools. And the truth is, some of them are so small that, a handful of kids getting a voucher to go somewhere else can absolutely, destabilize your school system in a tiny district. And so, these programs, even though there aren't very many private schools in, like, say, Illinois 12, and there's not that many kids who can really use vouchers, even a few leaving will be really devastating. So I think just the crucialness of that and getting the message to constituents in districts where this matters can make a difference. And we saw on the ballot last fall in both Kentucky and Nebraska, two very red states, vouchers were on the ballot there in ballot referenda, and they lost very strongly. And all in Kentucky, I think especially is like, something that you would not expect. And, every single county in Kentucky defeated vouchers. And, the entire state also voted for Donald Trump. So, you can be a Trump voter and oppose vouchers. And so it's actually been a very big struggle in some very red states like Texas to create a voucher program, which they finally, just passed something last week that looks like it will happen now in Texas. But that took, an out-of-state billionaire buying Republican primary candidates in many rural districts to make happen. So it's not actually popular on that side of the aisle. And so I think that's the thing to keep in mind, that when voters and constituents and just regular folks, hear about this, they oppose it. So that's, I think, a key lesson for everybody.
So So the
I would
word
say,
is out then.
What was that?
The word, I mean, it's, in other words, it
Yeah,
is
I
a
mean,
message that it's not hidden.
yeah.
It's a message that's really been resonating, and people are really feeling, they're informed about it and they're feeling strongly about it.
Yeah, when they are informed. So like if people know that, like there was some polling last fall and even both Democrats and Republicans, it was like, a polling of voters. Still the majority of everyone, both parties said they would rather have more money spent on public schools than to fund private school vouchers. So yeah, like the overall public opinion on it is certainly in that direction. So, but for this, I think there hasn't been that much media coverage of it.
Right.
And because it's being done in such a, weird procedural, sneaky kind of way, people do not know that. Like, I think if you poll people, they'd be like, okay, I think reconciliation might cut Medicaid. You probably get like a chunk of people who have heard that, but I think it would be much, much, much smaller that there'd be people who are like, oh, reconciliation could result in a private school national voucher program. So yeah.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
I think
Wow.
another difference, which was pretty basic, is that with Invest in Kids, we had, 18 months, 2 years to work on it. And this could happen like within weeks. So that's really scary and motivating. And I know we're hoping that we have a good turnout for the phone bank on Monday. And if anybody can join that, Cassie put up the connection for that. And Network 49, we're pretty small, but we've been calling into Illinois 12 and other districts, asking people to call their representatives, and we've had some pretty good responses. So, I mean, we have to hope that most actually responds to that, but we have had people who are pretty concerned and want to make that call and protect public education. So yeah, please join us on Monday. That's what I have to
Is
say.
that callback directed at Illinois, or is it national? It's a national callback.
We're going to be calling people in Illinois 12 in particular on Monday.
Illinois 12,
Yeah.
okay.
So
That
there
rural
has been a
area
little bit of
downstate.
like just this past week, there were some calls to some particular districts in like Pennsylvania and Washington state. So there is sort of a target list nationally of say 25 Republicans who could be persuadable on this. And, Mike Bost is actually like, very high on that list. So we have a good opportunity in Illinois. So we're trying to capitalize on that.
You said that you had said that there were 3 Illinois Republicans that were
Yeah.
that you were
So
working on, and of the and all, but
um
you said only one was possible.
probably so Mary Miller is, I mean, if you've heard about Mary Miller, like her husband was an insurrectionist. He's also a state rep. I mean, she is very, very, very pro-Trump. And won't be breaking with him on probably any issue, including this one. And then Darren LaHood is pro-voucher. He's been a sponsor of this bill because it's been introduced in the past. And yeah, he's pretty very, I mean, he actually had, his district had the fewest vouchers used during the state voucher program of anywhere in the state. His public schools are not well funded, but he's a little more ideological about this particular issue than Bost is, and doesn't really have the same sort of history as Bost does of supporting public schools. So, I mean, he deserves to be pressured, but I think he's less likely to be actually swung over. Whereas, I had a meeting with some constituents of Bost's back in January, and his assistant was very clear, like, there's a reason he hasn't put his name as a sponsor on this bill. He has sponsored bills like full funding for IDEA in the past. So yeah, he's just a little more likely on this particular issue to be responsive. So, I mean, I don't know, like, if that's really the sort of probability one should count on, but it's worth the effort, I think.
Mm. Anybody else?
Chris,
Any-
I was wondering, what kind of reaction did you get in calling into the 12th district? Were people aware? Um, and were they supportive once you talked to them, or were they unaware and still not willing to put a little pressure on Bush?
Well, truth be told, we had a list of people to call from Cassie. And so they were people who had already expressed some kind of interest in public education and were, who knows, probably Democrats. But they were, like any phone bank, most people don't pick up. You leave a lot of messages. But the people that we did talk to were very responsive and eager to make a call. Um, some of them had not heard of it. Actually, most of them had not heard much about it, but they were ready to do something. And I think in general, people are kind of activated right now because of everything that's going on. So they people would say, thank you for calling. I'm glad to know about this. I want to do whatever I can. So we felt like we had a pretty good response.
Hmm. Yeah, I find it like with a lot of these issues, people are just not aware. There's so
Mm.
much stuff happening in Washington that you get inundated with, and after a while, it becomes all just noise. So,
Yeah.
it's good to go directly to them and say, hey, here's an issue that's affecting you directly. Not something that is out there in the ethos, but your children, your schools.
Well, that brings me to a larger question, and that is the the challenges that we are having, and all of us would be having, on the way that the strategies have been going forth, inundating us with issues, and thus making it very difficult for the traditional ways in which we take or connect with people and get them to listen have been challenged. Cassie, what are you all doing beside the um the call bank to address that, or is that something from a strategy point of view that we need to look at and need to address as organizers?
I mean, it's something that worked. Like, I think one of the things that was very effective in fighting Invest in Kids was just that we built a whole statewide coalition and just, tried to make connections anywhere we could. And so, we've been trying, like, not necessarily, it's very hard for this because, like the relational map of groups and people that we work with and are connected to are very, Chicago centric, right? And then spreading out from there. And, a few bluer areas downstate. So trying to get on the ground connections in Southern Illinois is really rough. And so, longer term, like it would be a lot better for our state and certainly our country to like build these connections, because like the same issues that are things vary, but like at the core, the issues that say public schools and a lot of rural communities are facing are not that different than what we're facing here in Chicago, or say the south suburbs, or like all over the state. So trying to just actually build that relational organizing across geographical areas, I think is really
You mean making the
needed.
relationships?
Yeah.
I was thinking that the storytelling piece would be something that would be, if it could be effective. In preparing for this, I looked at the fact that apparently Arizona had been especially egregious, and it's got a long, long, long history that is very ugly. And it seems, and I concluded that just telling the story of Arizona to a lot of the region, the smaller regions and the people that are not our natural constituents might be effective. Um, does that resonate with you as a strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think like over the last like basically like couple years, because of our fight here, we've gotten connected to other people having voucher fights around the country, and including like a parent group in Arizona, and they actually have been doing some of that for this fight on ECA, and having people from like the Florida group or the Arizona group talk about what vouchers have done to their state budget, what they've done to their communities, what they've done to families. And yeah, that has done, I think it's been really good to have those, like, we're on the ground, we see what's happened. I mean, we can kind of do that here in Illinois a bit too, to be like, look, we've had vouchers here and this is what they looked like here. So that sort of like, we've got the direct experience already. I think it's a good thing, but personalizing it, I think is really good.
So how do you do it? What do you have people make videos? Do they do graphics and put them in comic book? What's the methodology for approaching a constituency that seems to have resonance in it?
I don't know. I mean, I think I just like have like, because I consume a lot of it, like there's been things that I think have been really interesting, or really you're like, oh, what, like there's been some reporting on Texas by this education reporter, Jennifer Berkshire, lately that's been really good, and gives you just a picture of like what, these are like seriously mega people who are also very anti-voucher, and hearing what their sort of worldview is and how this fits into it. And it's a big overlap with what we talk about, which is like, these are programs that are being pushed by billionaires and they're not for, regular folks. There was some ProPublica reporting about Arizona. I don't know if you guys saw that one, where it was like, it was actually a charter school that had been closed down by the state at the end of last school year, and then it opened up just a few months later as a private school that was getting vouchers, and within a couple months was so like poorly managed and underfunded and like fly by night that it closed, and all the families that had enrolled as the private school had to find a new school like 3 months into the school year. And yeah, that's even just the good pictures from that, which had just had the pictures of the school that disappeared in like the empty strip mall offices that the school had been located, were like, yeah, I think that stuff is pretty powerful. It's like, these are not,
Yeah.
yeah, this is not the way that we should be structuring an education system that's going to have the stability for kids and for communities. So
Jeanette, Tina has her hand up.
Oh, I didn't see it. Tina, go ahead.
Hi, my question is for Cassie and Chris. When speaking with legislators, I do speak with legislators on behalf of my fight, which is defending defined benefits. My focus, the macro is defined benefits. The micro is I'm focusing on the Chicago Public School, the Chicago Teacher Pension Fund. And my thing is, I go in there fighting for pensions, but this is something that could attach to it, because I know legislators, how they go, hey, if you vote for this one for me, I'll vote for this one for you. Like, if you vote for the pension, to restore the pension fund, I will help you and vote for opposing the ECCA. How do you, ECA?
yeah,
Is that a strategy that we can use? Or, you
I
know
mean,
what I'm talking about?
yeah,
How
yeah,
legislators do
definitely.
that?
I mean, in part, I mean, they're definitely related, right? Like, as you privatize the school system, you are throwing away basically good, stable jobs. And you don't have certified educators necessarily at all in these private schools, you may not even have educators once you start doing these homeschool and online schooling things. So it's certainly like really tied to
Together.
unionization and like labor justice. The hard thing for this right now is that, you know, and it's, I mean, it's been that way for a long time in DC, that things are so separate that there's not a lot of cooperation across the aisle. I mean, so we've met with a bunch of the Democratic congressional delegation members, and, you know, like, they're like, well, you know, we're going to vote against reconciliation no matter what. So do you have any other asks for us? And it's like, well, you know, I mean, something that we've seen like Sean Casten doing is, you know, sort of like what Bernie Sanders and AOC have been doing, you know, touring around the country in red areas. And Sean Casten was doing that in Southern Illinois. And so, you know, these Democratic legislators can go outside their comfort area and just, you know, you like Darren LaHood and Mike Bost have not had their own town halls for years. Like Bost hasn't had one since 2017. I think, you know, I don't know when LaHood had one last, but so it's like, if they're not going to show up, let's have, you know, everything's gerrymandered enough that no one's usually that many miles away from another overlapping Democratic district. So I think talking to the Democrats about, like, you know, what can you do to put pressure on your colleagues? And if that's showing up in your colleague's district and saying, hey, your public schools here are also under threat. It's not just your healthcare and social security and literally every other thing. It's also our public schools. So I think that is, I mean, our two senators have been pretty absent on this. Durbin, we had a meeting with his staffer, and she at least confirmed that he opposes this. Duckworth staff have not even given me an answer to say, like, yes, Tammy Duckworth opposes this. And like, they have statewide reach, they have statewide constituents, and they have statewide platform, and could really be a champion on this. But I mean, yeah, they, at the heart of things is, you know, for several decades, the Democrats have not actually been very good on public education either, and have not actually wanted to see public schools succeed particularly. And
Well, I feel that. I feel that
so
100%.
yeah, I mean, that's how we got a voucher program here in Illinois, is that was, you know, essentially bipartisan. So yeah,
Okay. We'll try
it's
our
all
best.
uncomfortable.
We got, you know, the song that I like to, it's like push from cheerleading, push them back, way back. If you don't push them back, they'll take over. It's like bad weeds.
Yeah.
Well, it's Marion, are you still there with us? Because I know that I was listening to looking at your message that said you had a fundraiser and it was loud there. That's what was kept keeping her from participating. I was wondering if you wanted to say anything.
I think maybe she is not on the call.
I don't see her. on.
Okay, she may have
Yeah,
gone. Yeah,
on the call.
because I'm sure it was very distracting to try to do both things for her.
Cassie, I wanted, and Chris, I wanted to ask, how are teachers unions, including like IFT and statewide, pushing back on this? Are they involved?
IFT has been very active and very involved, and they've been a great partner to work with over the last couple of months. And IEA, we've been asking them, IFT has been asking them, and they have not done a lot that I know of. I mean, not like they're like, you know, Cassie Cresswell, we are going to tell you what we're doing, but
Yeah.
things have not popped up that they have been pushing, which is tough because, you know, some of these districts, you know, IFT and IEA are not like distributed equally all over the state in terms of where the locals are. And so, you know, there's most of the locals in aisle 12, for example, are IEA locals. So it's like,
Okay.
yeah. So that makes it a little harder.
Sure. All right.
Yeah, but we're collaborating with IFT on this phone bank. So
Okay, cool.
which is
Thanks.
great. Yeah, very helpful.
Well, you have been so thorough in this, and it's you know, painted a very you know, deep and excellent picture. That sounds as if there is some really right now stuff that should be done. And it does sound as if we have an opportunity to make it plain and get people to participate if they knew it, if they knew and if the messages were that that clear. And it sounds like the strategies of finding ways to go into the territory of the Republicans, like you said, downstate, that downstate area, um, with those messages. And that's where your phone bank is aimed at, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that sounds as if that has a lot of merit. But I'm wondering if the strategies are absolutely about appealing to the Republicans because you're saying that they can pass this thing without a Democratic vote. If
Yeah.
that's why it's almost totally dependent upon trying to change Republican minds. Have you all considered doing anything like was done with Wisconsin, going to some of the neighboring states that have Indiana, Wisconsin, you know, other states and working on their Republican issue, their constituents and people? Because it sounded as if you said that there's only in Illinois there's probably no chance of getting the change of mind of two of the people.
Yeah, I mean there's the National Coalition for Public Education. That's
Yes.
sort of working on this very kind of insider lobbying game. And then like we got involved because some more like kind of grassroots groups reached out to us because we had been fighting for on vouchers here in Illinois.
In Illinois, yeah.
So they do have you know, like working, I think especially like coordinating with the national group in terms of, okay, who are good targets. And so, you know, you might have a very red state, but only a couple of the Republicans there are really worth talking to, sort of like here, where it's like, you know, either they won by a small margin or, you know, they have some particular history that they have been actually pretty good on public ed issues. And they haven't put their name on the bill yet as a sponsor. And so they've kind of like narrowed it down. And I feel like there's like maybe like one in Indiana that's a target and one in Iowa, one in Missouri. But not so much anyone in Wisconsin or Michigan really on their list. So it's kind of sprinkled all over the state, or all over the country. So yeah, this phone bank that happened this week was like sort of like Washington, Pennsylvania, and then maybe a couple districts in like Kentucky and Nebraska. So they're sort of basic. I mean, we're all kind of like little tiny organizations for the most part that are working on it in Illinois. So we're sort of like, okay, this is what we can sort of, you know,
This is what
bite
we can
off
do.
into.
Yeah.
So let's see what we can do, you know, here in Illinois. I actually like reached out to, there's an Indiana Coalition for Public Education, and there's like a St. Louis parent group to see if they wanted to do any co-phone banking, but I haven't heard back yet. So, but I think we'll probably do like another one the following week after this one on the 28th. So yeah, we are, you know, gonna keep on pushing while we still have this window and things. I mean, I think in Trump's first term, it took them a very long time to get their stuff together to pass a reconciliation bill. And it did not happen quickly in the spring of his, you know, first year. So, you know, if things go badly enough for them, they may not get their stuff together. So like the more, you know, outrage and anger and making it difficult for everyone. So, you know, trying to thread the needle of people being very angry about, you know, slashing Medicaid funding, which covers 50% of the kids in Illinois. you know, with also some of these like really far right Republicans who don't want to increase the debt ceiling, don't want to have, you know, increase the debt generally. So, you know, keeping everyone happy and getting to the magic number to pass a bill, it is difficult. So the more we can do and stir up.
To keep it stirred. Okay,
Yeah.
well that you've made a really good case as far as I can see, and I certainly can imagine that we can beat the drums and get the CWTA the our group excited and involved and certainly it's very concrete to be able to plug into something you've already done and you've done so well. And so I can see it as a message that could go out that could get people's attention. So
That'd be
you
great.
posted the method of getting in touch with you to join the uh, phone bank,
Yeah.
right? That's that. Okay, I see it here. And that
Yes,
phone bank date
absolutely.
is, pardon me,
The longer URL in there too.
yes. So that phone bank date is what date?
This coming Monday, so
Monday.
for
That's the
4 days
20,
now.
that's the
Yeah, 28th.
28th, the 28th. Okay, so we don't have much time, but we can
Yeah,
do
it would be great if you
we can
guys can promote it. That would be great. If you want to,
yeah.
you know, officially listed as a sponsor, we are happy to add you. Yeah.
Jackie, that would that be, I mean, is that something that we can do without having, to go through the mechanism of the organization? Or do you know? Commit to doing something like that? Or can we just put our heads together tomorrow or later on and see about endorsing it? Jackie may not be on she must have been distracted. But anyhow, thank you. This has been very, very, very informative for me. I'm I can definitely see that you've done a heck of a job of cutting through a lot of the yeah that is very difficult to cut through right now because there's so many important issues that are seriously uh, uh, impacting us. So, consider us linked up, and consider us. And I believe that this committee work is going to grow and grow and grow because you started to talk about, or at least what we were going to do at least at the beginning of the hour, uh, was to be able to uh, get a laundry list of some of the major issues, major and moderate and small issues that are burgeoning in this whole area. For us as a committee to be able to acknowledge what was going on and who in some of the partnerships or some of the people that were dealing with some of those issues so that we could become familiar with it and begin to put our heads together about what some strategies are. So in the waning 4 minutes that we have, I want us to understand that what we're going to talk about and deal with um, next month, we're going to reverse it and talk about the CPS area because we're trying to both keep our heads together about the federal because it ultimately becomes local, and what should we do coming down the pike and what's going on right now that we need to be able to put our heads on and or at least know about that's going on in the CPS area. So if I'm suggesting that we could just briefly name some of those issues that are coming down the pike. And if you know, if you have some issues that you think we should prioritize, I've got my own opinions, but I've been talking all night. Is there anything that you, Cassie, or anyone would like to say about the CPS stuff that's now that the issue is settled on the teacher strike? We've got some things that are real serious that are coming up. Um, I'll just name one of them, the DEI fight that there's a lawsuit that is filed over the Black student. The name of it is escaping me now. I knew it, but now I'm not sure that the name is that. But it's basically an organization that, or a something that was passed to really deal with the fact that the African American student is so extremely far behind um, in every aspect, that there was an actual initiative
Mhm.
that was passed. Yvette, what do you know the name of that?
Yeah, it's Black Student Success.
That's right, Black Student Success. Yes.
Mhm.
Black student success. And there's a lawsuit that's been filed, of course, and of course it's totally connected to the big DEI fight that we're going to have to deal with in every level, in every way. Anybody want to say anything about that, or any of the other issues that are opportunities for us to think about prioritizing?
Well,
Yes, Tina.
well, my fight is to protect our defined benefit, which is our 130-year-old fund that should be 24, or I've lost count what the amount of money that should be in that fund. And I am trying to restore it because this is a different attack on public education. It's an attack on public education. They're coming from all different directions and dismantling our our way of recruiting and retaining talent is crucial in the field of education, in any field. Our experience dealing with all the different personalities, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So defending this 130-year-old fund is crucial to sustaining public education, great public education. And this is our inheritance. This is money that people worked hard for. These are it's our deferred compensation that people are dismantling right before our eyes, and nobody knows about it.
Okay, I don't know about it. So thank you for putting that on our radar.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything that occurs to them, either in the form of something that's a challenge or possibly something that is actually an opportunity?
I
Well,
just,
I have an opportunity. I have an action going on right now is
What is
to
that?
um email the governor's office. The governor's office is we're talking to the governor's office to tell them how important it is to defend the defined benefit, which is a pension. You know, the words, they killed us not with math when they stole, I'm going to watch my words. When in 1995, when the dismantling began, I'll just call it that, and the legislation put a word, they called it a holiday, which was a bad word because again, this is what politicians do. They're deceptive. They're
Yeah,
magicians, not politicians. They're magicians.
yeah.
They're experts in deceiving us.
So if there's that's
Oh,
something that
the
we
action is
can
to
look
call,
into.
yeah, I could put it in I have like a template that you can look at to see what I'm using with my people that are helping me. And it's just, this is a grassroots thing that I'm doing here. Um,
If you want to send some information so that
should
we
I
can.
just do it? I'll put it into the link. Just a letter that I just crafted for you to get some information about. I have so much information. I don't know where to start. But I'll send you the letter that
So
I've
the so
crafted for
so so s-
legislators.
the main thing would probably be for us to be able to find ways in which we can learn more about the issue itself. The thing,
Okay,
because we're out of time now, I just want to mention the one thing that I was very interested in, because I think that it has merit, not only in terms of CPS's use, but I think that it has merit that could really transcend CPS. And that is, there is a part of the Board of Education that is just that has just passed a plan that is a strategic plan that has to do with art in the using arts in the schools. And there's a tremendous push to use a big piece of our budget toward that end, based on the fact that there's been such huge data that has been substantiated about how where arts are used in the curriculums, the tremendous uh, push upwards for not only academic achievement but for mental health. One of the things that is really seriously roiling our children now. Mental health is enormous, and there is connections between young people sing using music, using poetry, using dance, using filmmaking, that appeals to their creative spirits, even if their reading levels are hugely underfunded or underdone. That has made uh, many of the philanthropies, as well as the mayor and other entities, very interested in looking at and pushing this. So look at the new plan, the strategic plan that was just passed last week by the Arts Education Department of CPS, and take a look to see if there are things that we might wish to raise up, because it has such potential for really doing something that's quite amazing throughout the whole school system, not just for certain kids. So with that said, I don't want to keep us anymore. We're 5 minutes over. I guess I'm taking back that 5 or 10 minutes before I could get in. Uh, thank you for your patience. Thank you for this wonderful, very thorough uh, information that you brought, Cassie. You've got me thinking how wonderful it will be to be part of the grassroots team that's doing such good work. And so we will send that out. We will promote that for sure, and we will keep on promoting it. I'm very interested in what kind of messaging we can do, even beyond that particular thing, to keep things going. So if there's nothing else that anyone likes to want to say or announce, or a partnership that they would like to tell us about that's doing good work in this area, I'm going to ask for us to adjourn.
Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Thank you
Cassie.
Okay.
so much for
And
having me.
Chris, thank you for the
Thank you very
info.
much.
I will
All right.
spread the word.
All
Okay.
right. And I will too. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Good
Bye.
night.